then let us begin. Today we're talking about how to write the thesis statement for your research argument paper, the argument claim. And this sentence can't simply be a sentence that you think encapsulates your topic. It must be a sentence that follows a number of rules in order for it to work. If it does not follow these rules, then you will find proceeding rather difficult. Now when I do this with students, and most students pay attention, follow my rules, follow the restrictions for writing the sentence, and the next step is fine, the next step is fine, the next step is fine. Those students who do not write a sentence that conforms to these guidelines find research difficult, find writing difficult, and everything else is very confusing. And eventually what they have to do is go back and rewrite this sentence in order for them to proceed. So make sure that you're following these rules. First of all, we're talking about an argumentative claim of action. There are two, well, probably more, but two basic claims of argument that you could make. One would be action, the other would be evaluation. And evaluation means I'm saying, hey, this is good. This movie is the best movie. This rapper is the best rapper. This is the best contestant on American Idol. That's an evaluation. That's where you're providing value for something. We're talking about action. And if we're talking about action, we're asking somebody to do something. What word will we see in each one of these? Correct. Or some students really like the more fancy ought. However, that's your choice, and most students use the word should. It's based on an opinion, and the word should will invoke that opinion. If you use a verb like is or was, then you're merely making a statement of fact, and it's not a statement of opinion. So you must make sure to take a look at your sentence and see whether or not it does include the word should. This, obviously, is incorrect. High school students use cell phones between classes. It's a statement of fact. How do you verify it? Brett, how do you verify this sentence as true or false? High school students use cell phones between classes. You must prove that is true. How do you do it? Yeah, you do research out in the hallway and you see whether or not high school students are using cell phones between classes. It's simple fact. You verify it pretty easily through research. Could somebody give me this same topic but make it opinionated, argumentative? Kim? High school students should not be able to use their cell phones between classes. That would now be argumentative. Of course, I believe that high school students should be allowed to use their cell phones between classes, so my revision says high school students should be allowed to use cell phones between classes. But it's as simple as that. Make sure that you include the word should whenever you're writing these statements. Argumentative claim of action, as we discussed before in class, presents a controversy. That statement that you just saw probably will bring about a controversy. Definition. Zach, you're paying rapt attention. What's the definition of controversy? Excellent. A topic that elicits a lot of arguments. It divides people. Camps pro and con suddenly spring up. Let's list the most controversial topics in public discourse right now. Abortion, yes, pro and con. Of course, this is a very emotionally infused. What else? Gay marriage, what else? You hit some of the pretty easy, general, hot topic issues. How about something more specific, maybe? Zach? Oh, excellent. Yeah, absolutely. So reactor safety, the experience in Japan right now is dividing camps pro-nuke and con-nuke on whether or not we should continue with nuclear energy or continue with the spread of nuclear energy in the United States. Jordan, did you have another one? Excellent. So that one presents a lot of controversy, not whether or not we disagree with Gaddafi's actions, but where would the controversy be? Very good. And the extent to which we should be involved in enforcing the no-fly zone and so on. By the way, you guys please tell me some of you are at least aware that we're now militarily involved in a third conflict. Okay. Over the weekend, U.S. planes have provided support for British and French air and attacking targets in Libya. The federal government should legalize murder. Why do I say no? Denise, why is this not a controversial topic? Why is this not controversial? I'm saying this doesn't work because it's not controversial. It does contain the word should, but I'm saying it's broken because it's not controversial. Well, that's true. However, some laws that are on the books are controversial. Going back to the abortion issue, Roe versus Wade, that is a decision made by the Supreme Court, yet it's still controversial. Why isn't this controversial? Emma, help her out. Because it does not divide pro and con camps. Everybody agrees with this. Now, there's always somebody in the class who raises their hand and says, I could see somebody disagreeing with it. Well, no, they're insane. And we're not trying to account for the irrational or the insane. We're talking about rational, sane people taking positions for and against this. And no rational person takes a position against this. Therefore, it's not controversial. That one is. The federal government should endorse a religion. Brett? Oh, okay. Yeah, you disagree. However, no, exactly. That's the point, right? So you will be in a con camp on that one. Have you heard of people agreeing with this, though?
I have.
Enough?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I've heard plenty of people who claim that because the founding fathers come from a primarily Christian background, and a lot of that informs their philosophy, that the United States should endorse some sort of Christianity as a religion that guides all of our policy decisions, allowing for all different sects of Christianity, but still basically a Christian nation. Must be affirmative. This is a simple grammar standard. Why does this one fail? Kim? It has the word not. Simple grammar standard on this. What other words would indicate negation besides not? Sorry? Zach? Somebody give me a word that indicates negation. How do you negate a verb? Cannot, sure. Is not the only qualifier? No, actually restrict is still affirmative. If I said do not restrict, that would be negative. But Jordan, I'm glad you bring that up because the word restrict seems negative, right? But it's only negative in its connotation. It's not a negative verb. Negative verbs are only negative when they include this sort of qualifier, this not qualifier. So restrict, although negative in connotation, is not a negative verb. You could also say the same for fail. If I say, I failed to complete my homework, you might say, well, that's a negative statement. No, it's actually an affirmative statement because you did fail. Nobody has another qualifier word that we should be looking out for? Silence descends. Never is another negative qualifier. I use this one because it's somewhat similar to what Jordan was talking about. The word reduce seems negative in its connotation. It is negative in its connotation. However, the verb itself is affirmative. Watch out for qualifiers like not or never. Number one criterion that will present you with problems. And we've talked about this for the last couple of days when we were brainstorming topics. Your argumentative claim of action must be written clearly. It must be specific. Why is this not? Austin. No, that would be the criterion of controversiality. So you'd be saying it's not controversial, and actually quite a lot of people in growing numbers now believe that global warming doesn't exist, so it would still bring about controversy. Go ahead, Austin. How is it not being specific? Not saying how, And another very important point of information is missing. Who? I'm reading your paper. I do this. What do I mark above it? Thank you. Passive. This is written in the passive voice, which means that the actual doer of the action, the agent, is missing. One of the primary reasons you will not be specific is that you will miss the who. We call this, or we can call this, the responsible party. The person, organization, people who are responsible for taking this action. This one has none. So we need a responsible party. And, as Austin's saying, the how should be in there as well. The more specific you are on that, the easier the research is, the easier the writing is. That one's actually still a little bit general because it doesn't answer the how question so much. However, it does give me a who. Talking about world governments. So maybe I want to write a paper not just talking about the United States, but talking about issues like the Kyoto Accords, which would unify the global community. Must be arguable. Very rarely do I see students violate this criterion. I like to watch reality television. Besides the fact that this is not necessarily opinion-based with a should, it's also not really arguable. You can't take a side against it. You must be able to see a con argument springing up. Could somebody take the concept of reality television and write a claim for it? Mackenzie?
Teenagers and younger children should not watch reality television.
Very, very good. However, it's negative. I like that, but let's change it to affirmative. Teenagers and young children should not watch reality television. How do we fix it? But should be restricted now is once again passive voice, which means you're implying a responsible party. Who would be doing that action? Okay, the FCC should restrict teenagers and young children from watching reality television. Now it's specific. And now it's affirmative, and now everything seems to be working just fine. Television producers should program more reality television. This one works as well. You can research it, you can argue it. You can take a side for, and you can take a side against. If you're reading your claim, and one of the sides does not immediately come to your attention, pro or con, then it's possible that yours is not arguable. You may have a problem. However, like I said, this is the criterion which I see students breaking least often. This is the assignment. This is the assignment copy taken directly from the website, so let me go over it, and then in the remaining time we'll workshop examples. I'll help as many of you as I can. Write a thesis statement for your topic that follows the guidelines for effective argument claims. You will earn full credit for committing no violations of the effective argument claim approach. You'll lose points for every one of those that you violate. Check the Writer's Workshop discussion on argument claims for assistance. The Writer's Workshop has extensive material about argumentative claims, how you write them, going over all of this material, so if for some reason you forget, treat that as your textbook. Post your claim on Google Docs in a file titled Research Argument Paper. Bring no hard copy to class. Don't need it. You will earn no credit if you do not follow this instruction. So if you bring a hard copy and you did not upload it to Google Docs, or if you send me a file attachment, that will not earn credit. So make sure that you are following those instructions. Question on the concepts, question on the assignment. Then who wants to try? Jordan? Do a Control A. Control A. Yeah. That should be easier to read. Go ahead. right. Imagine you're me. You've just received this as a submission. Grade it. Points lost, points earned. Austin? Why is it not arguable? Very good. So it violates that last criterion for argument claims because it's not a statement. So it's not arguable. What is it? Where does it work? Because you will not write claims that are totally broken. I'm sorry? Yeah, it's very controversial. Controversy check. What else? Nothing else? Look at the notes that you just took. Grade like I grade, and you can earn full points. Dakota.
Should you open up the all four affairs, or should you just
Thank you. So I'm going to put a question mark here. It might be skirting the line on specificity. It might not be specific enough. And I like where Dakota's doing, or where Dakota's going. Should we talk about all foreign affairs or just some of them? And should we talk about type of involvement? Charitable donations, military. It seems like you're opening all foreign affairs and all types of involvement, and that might be a little bit too broad. Because it's not a statement, because it's a question. So that's very true. However, he has the basic groundwork because he has the word should. So technically, it's not an opinion because he has not rendered any sort of statement there. I'm sorry? It is actually affirmative. I do not see this word. Zach, you must see that word in order for it to be negative. So is it affirmative? Yes. Two violations, one questionable, and two places in which he's working with this. Control G, please. Somebody have a solution. Let's take Jordan's ideas and shape them such that he earns full points on it. What do you know you'll start with? United States, go ahead. Sorry, I'm on a default white here. I should change that to a default green. United States. What's the next word? Should. Sorry? Do you want to take us out of foreign affairs or keep us in? Okay. Reduce. Let's try reduce. Reduce is a little bit better than stop. Stop is so extreme that quite often it's hard to argue that. It's a lot easier to argue some sort of gray area because that's more realistic. United States should reduce interfering. No, you're good. There you go. With foreign affairs, do we want to specify that at all?
maybe we could either do Libya or Japan?
So you want to talk, oh, both? So you want to talk about both domestic issues and military issues? Well, here's where you go with that. The United States should reduce, or let's say reduce interference. That's a little bit more correct grammatically. The United States should reduce interference with other nations' domestic and military affairs. Is it arguable? Yeah, so you can see a way to research either side of this and present cases for either side. Yeah, good. Controversial? Absolutely. We do still have a trend of isolationism in this nation. People who would like us to stop spending money on foreign issues, especially when it comes to military expenditures. So it seems like I'm going to have pro and con camps. Is it specific?
Yeah.
It's now specific because we've said this and this. So we haven't specified a nation that we should not be involved in or a region of the world, but we have at least specified how. Opinionated? Yeah. Affirmative? Yes. It works. That's good enough. So if that's where Jordan wants to go with it, that statement would earn full points. Caution, Jordan. This is still pretty broad. So the broader your topic, sometimes the more difficult because you have a lot more work to do. So you might consider that. You might specify to one of these two, domestic or military. Which one do you think that Jordan would have an easier time arguing against? Military interference or domestic interference? In other words, Japan or Libya? Which one? Libya, absolutely. Why? Because it results in dead Americans. Whereas providing assistance to Japan just results in irradiated Americans who will then die later. Okay, next. Who else wants to try? Okay, let's pass it over to Caitlin here. Of course. And Caitlin, give me one moment because this has already fallen out of orientation. Go ahead. Here, if you want me to. Okay. Wow. All right. Let's talk about it. Let's do the easy ones first. It's opinionated, right? Because we have the word should. It's affirmative because she does not say should not evaluate. She says should evaluate. So we're good on 2 of the 5. Does it seem controversial? Yeah, I hope so. We're talking about the federal government making a decision for families about whether or not their parents, their grandparents should go into a home. Is that basically what we're talking about? All right, cool. Controversial. Arguable? I could see research on both sides of this. It seems fairly easy there. So is it specific enough? I'm sorry? Well, that's a good question, Kim. So Kim's asking what exactly is meant by a home care plan. That could be something that she would define later and probably will require careful definition. In fact, I could see if Caitlin's arguing this, possibly as long as a page being devoted to the definition of home care plan. So when you use a term like that, if the term itself is generic or too vague, that's a problem. But if the term itself just begs definition, then that's not a problem with specificity. One noun in here needs to be qualified. Dakota, do you have an idea? Yeah. Which government? Federal? Yeah. Okay. Folks, keep that in mind. You're arguing government policy, you must specify federal, state, local. You've been through government or you're going through government right now. You know the issues with federalism. You know the issues with which powers are reserved to which part of government, so you must specify that. I'm so curious about this. Caitlin, you want to explain where you would be going with this?
Yeah, well, right now I'm shadowing at Flower
Uh-huh.
Hospital in occupational therapy, and I've been observing mostly elderly people, and a lot of them were in occupational therapy because of falls.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they can't really take care of themselves, but so they have to go into their homes and like
That's fantastic. I love that Caitlin is not arguing this out of a disgust and hatred for senior citizens. She doesn't say, I don't like any of them, I want to put them all in homes. She's saying, honestly, in my experience, I've seen that a lot of senior citizens are suffering, so they are personally suffering, and then they're becoming sort of a financial drain on families and communities and so on, because nobody's helping them out. So she says, I want to help them. This is an effort to help them. So she has that good intention on her side. Strong values, we'll talk about warrants later. She'll have a strong warrant, it'll work pretty well. What's the counter argument brewing? How do a lot of people in our society react to the good intentions of a federal government program? To controlling, keep the federal government out of our lives. So that's a classic contrast between sort of the liberal sensibility of we want to help people, we want to reduce pain and suffering, and we want to use this gigantic stick called the federal government to do that. And then the more conservative side says, no, let families and the free market and everything else take care of it, keep the federal government out. Good. Next. Yeah, how many? Government should increase the amount of marriage therapy before a divorce settles. Running down the list, do the quick ones easy. Yes on opinionated, yes on affirmative. Controversial. Why? They feel that they should have the right to decide to divorce or not to divorce outside of government interference? Yeah. Because if this one went through, the government would be taking more of a control over that decision, preventing you from making the decision to divorce or not to divorce. And as we discussed on Friday, this brings up the specter of racism as well. Or not racism, sexism, sorry. At a point in time when women had more difficulty divorcing and therefore taking themselves out of abusive relationships when they didn't have so much power. However, this statement doesn't seem to focus on men or women specifically, so it could be very equal in that regard. But it's just sort of a sore point for a lot of people. Yes? Once again, type of government. So what you want to do is make sure you research who has control over this? State, I believe. State would have control over marriage and divorce regulations. So you have a choice. You can say state governments, and that would be specific enough, or you can specify a state. If you have a state itself, if you say Ohio, what benefit does that provide? It's not so broad, that's true. But what benefit does that provide in the writing of this paper? You have more concrete information you can research, so probably a little bit easier. So rather than generalizing what all states do, because you know what? All states do things differently. You can focus on one state and what they actually do. You might look at that and say, but that's not what I'm arguing. I'm arguing for all states to do that. True, but you're also writing a paper that should be manageable and easy to write. So balance your need for the claim that you want to make the change in the world that you want with the needs of the research argument paper. Could be Ohio should increase the amount of marriage and so on. So we need to specify. Do we need to specify increase the amount of marriage? I think in another case this specification could come later, so that's fine. So if we do that, it's specific. It is controversial, and it is arguable. There's plenty of place to research and take positions on both sides. And we have time for one more. No more volunteers, even if you think it's totally broken, because we can just fix it. No? All right, well, then we'll just close down right there.